everyone. Welcome to the 5-Beer Plan. I'm Brian, and this is the ongoing saga of an Everyman's Ale Trail. In this episode, the content is a little lighter, but no less interesting. I mash in on the latest homebrew project, get some equipment upgrade advice from my expert David, shoot the moon one more time with Cody from Two Toms, and review a tasty, barrel-aged rye beer. But before we get this party started, here is this episode's burning question. What is your favorite rye beer? I checked Untappd, and my favorite is Gettin' Twisted German Pretzel Ale from none other than the Flavor Wizards at Third Eye Brewing in Cincinnati, Ohio. This beer poured a pale golden color. Aromatic and malty German pretzel on the nose. It tastes exactly like a damn pretzel. Crisp hop bite on the palate with a hint of rye mixed in. I don't know how they do it, but this is the magic of beer. In this segment of Homebrew Hijinks, it's time to mash in on the Creek Valley Cream Ale. As I mentioned in the previous episode, this would be the first time brewing a cream ale. The cream ale, in my opinion, is one of the best base styles of beer that offers an expansive palate upon which to impart many different flavors for variants. Since I would be adding strawberry and even some cacao nibs in a few bottles, I opted for a slight twist of the style. This recipe would have just shy of 2 pounds of grain. The majority of the grain bill would be American Pale Ale malt, a small amount of Munich Dark Specialty malt, and of course, flaked corn. The Munich malt would give the beer a slightly darker tint and maybe a hint of roastiness that might play well with my idea. I measured 2.5 quarts of water and began to heat it in my pasta pot. As I was doing so, I poured my milled grain into my brew bag and added 1 ounce of rice hulls to make sure the grain would not clump together during the mash. I also turned on my oven and set it to its lowest setting, which is approximately 170 degrees Fahrenheit. Once I reached my strike temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit, I placed the grain bag in the pot and stirred the grain to make sure it was all wet. The strike temperature I was aiming for was 152 degrees Fahrenheit. I measured it and was at 148 degrees Fahrenheit, but knew that once I placed it into my oven with the door cracked, I would achieve that easily. I set my timer for 60 minutes and worked on some of the other preparation tasks. Next episode, I kick off the boil. Homebrewing can be overwhelming, especially if you are just starting out. Every month, I set aside a few minutes to talk to my go-to expert, David Young, owner of Buckeye Brewcraft in Columbus, Ohio, and ask him some common questions that homebrewers have. My wife thinks that I need to upgrade my equipment from the pasta pot and the glass carboy fermenter that I have. As we've talked about previously, that particular size of brewing fits my needs well. Interestingly enough, at Christmas time, my mother and father bought me a BrewTech 7-gallon fermenter.
Wow.
It was a little bit of a surprise. Marketplace find. Brand new, right? So now I've got this BrewTech fermenter that's way too big for what I do on a 1-gallon scale. So now I'm thinking, well, do I then need to get myself the corresponding SS BrewTech boil kettle? So now I'm thinking through these things. When does it make sense for the homebrewer to go to more professional equipment?
What a rabbit hole this is. So first and foremost, I think you started out this segment by saying my wife has suggested that I increase my equipment or get
That is
different
correct.
or whatever. Lean into that with all you can lean. Not necessarily to ask and to gimme, but just because, clearly your wife is supportive of what you're doing. I will say that it is absolutely commonplace, and we hear all the time that spouses of whoever homebrews are excited about it, but it is not often in a relationship that somebody says, hey, let's talk about the opportunity of spending more money. It's not overly common in this day and age. But what does lean into that for you mean? First of all, there's probably a lot of jealous people that are homebrewers that hear that you have a 7-gallon SS BrewTech. Because I'm sure, is it one of the bucket conical fermenters?
It is.
Those things are killer good. SS BrewTech is such such a good company. So it is pricier equipment for sure, but man, that stuff is built to last. So
Yeah.
yeah, I enjoy the heck out of it. If you're asking me, I would say, and I think I've told you this several times, you need to increase your production, man. It's time. It gets a little bit tricky because, again, talking to you specifically, Brian, you make 1 gallon batches that kind of fits with your consumption schedule because you can drink them in an X amount of Y time and it's easy to bottle and then you can reuse the bottles. I know the game. I don't know that that changes with 3, 4, or 5 gallon batches. Yes, it means you have more of it, but it also means A, you have more to share. There's something to be said for that.
Sure.
And B, it also means that you have potentially less of a need for consecutive brew days like you do now. You're producing what you consume or consuming what you produce. Well, I guess that's always going to be the case. But in a 5 gallon batch, it may mean that your brew days look a little bit different. And so, what's the question for you in this particular moment of what does a different kind of brew day look like? Well, Brian, thanks for asking. I'm happy to talk to you about it. I talk to people about this really commonly that do brew smaller side of batches. Now, for the sake of this conversation, we're going to leave 1 gallon behind, even though it could still be relevant. We're going to talk about 2.5 gallon batches.
Okay.
So your brew day could go from the idea of making 1 5 gallon beer into making 2 2.5 gallon beers. They can ferment in primary in that bucket conical, just like you would expect, but then split off a batch of it into another way, flavor it, dry hop it, do whatever to create a different animal. I do this all the time because I have a bigger brew system that'll let me brew bigger beers. But what the heck am I going to do with 12 or 13 gallons of a beer? If you think a 5 gallons a stretch for you, like I'm still one person in a 3-person household that what the heck am I? I have kegs everywhere. So what I do a lot of times is brew typically a 10 gallon batch and I split it into 2 5 gallons that we treat in different ways to make 2 different beers. So that gets lost a lot, I think. And it's important to note that breweries that you go to are doing the same thing. Their passion fruit IPA is also their West Coast IPA.
Yeah.
It's just flavored differently. So I think that that's something to keep in mind as you kind of explore your brew days. You'll get twice as much out of them as you may now, and that lets you take advantage of that. Now, as far as the question of when does it make sense for person A, B, C, or D to upgrade, change, get quote unquote more professional equipment, that's a great one. What you start out with, it definitely determines what more professional, again, in air quotes, looks like. But assuming that you're starting from the place that most do with some sort of kettle on some sort of heat source, and then moving into something like a bucket and a carboy and then into bottles. More professional can really probably in this day and age most commonly look like an upgraded fermenter. You have that. That SS Brewtech is absolutely going to do that for you. I think there are so many companies that make them. In fact, he struggles to say out loud, there are Chinese manufacturers that are making incredibly affordable conical fermenters now. For one, if you want something that can let you take up the same amount of space as you have in your home right now, relatively speaking, and have the same kind of brew day that you have right now, again, relatively speaking, a conical fermenter can be a really great way to go. That can look anything like a Firmzilla from Kegland, which I love. I've used them for years. That is a clear PET plastic conical shaped domey thing that sits on a stand that lets you collect yeast on the bottom if you want, lets you pressure ferment if you want to move into that sort of an upgrade. So I'm going to use the word cheap. That's not the case. They are very, very affordable. You can get the 7.5 gallon Firmzilla for something like $80 now. And that comes with all the fittings that you need. And then if you want to move into the world of pressure fermenting to like create lagers at room temperature and whatnot, it's like a $25 upgrade to do that. It's insanely cost effective. I have the bigger version of it too. I think it's a 14. I mean, they do everything in liters. So it may be, I don't know. Anyway, I do 10 or 12 gallon batches in it. And then it has a little bit of headspace there too. I think that one was like $120. It's insanely cost effective.
Sure.
I use those a lot. I love them. I also have a big mega duty conical unitank type thing where I can do 15 gallon batches and pressure ferment and transfer and carb and dump and reuse. I have one of the brew build systems that More Beer has that I got from Marketplace from a guy that just got out of brewing. I paid next to nothing for it. That stuff's out there too, by the way. And, the initial brew days for me didn't change. I used the same process and went straight into this conical. But what happens in the conical, it's a different fermentation. Things happen differently. I don't like to say that equipment makes the difference, but in the case of going from a bucket to a conical, you do get a lot more effective beer production. It just is what it is. It's why every brewery on the freaking planet uses them. And they just come down so much in cost. So if I had to choose a point number one to start, look for something that lets you replace the fermentation side of brewing and start there. Once you've scratched that itch and you've gone as far as, hawking window air conditioners from your neighbor's window to build glycol chillers out of, work back into the stuff that you're using on your actual brew day. So first and foremost, and I cannot stress this enough, make yourself as efficient. And I'm talking about brew house efficiency. Make yourself as efficient as possible with the equipment that you have before considering the next step. Because if you take an inefficient process into a bigger, heavier duty piece of equipment, it doesn't just magically get better. So make sure that if you're going to move from what we'll call a traditional brew in a bag process into one of the all-in-one systems like a Brewzilla or an Anvil Foundry or whatever other ones are out there, make sure that you're good because your problems are going to come with you. But that would be the second place that I would say to go. If you're brewing on your stovetop in your house right now, look for something that's dedicated, whether that's getting a propane burner and a bigger kettle, whether that's getting an all-in-one system that works with electricity, go that route next. Once you've got those two things in place, meaning the fermenter first and the brewing system at large taken care of, then look at the ways that you can increase the efficiency of that process. And that's the ongoing fun. So very, very long-winded answer to the question of when does it time to get something more professional? But that time is when you've reached peak efficiency and there's a time for you to do something better. There's a time where you can reach the next level in some way.
If you have a question that you'd like answered, reach out to me at 5beerplan@frontier.com and put Ask the Expert in the subject line. Also, if you are ever in need of homebrew supplies with great customer service, expert answers, and high-quality supplies, please check out Buckeye Brewcraft. You can find them on the web at buckeyebrewcraft.com and tell them that you heard about them on the podcast. Now, it's time for Barstool Banter. This episode, Cody Moon from Two Toms Brewing in Fort Wayne, Indiana, concludes our conversation, finishing his thoughts on beer school offerings, their most recent Frozen Firkenfest, the state of the industry, and a revisiting of my favorite question.
But yeah, so I think we'll do the sour class and the barrel aging class again this year at some point. I think June and September are already scheduled out for a class. I just don't know which one yet. But yeah, I just like talking beer and explaining what drives me about it. It's always weird because like as a former teacher, like I couldn't tell people I did this as a thing because it's kind of, I don't want to say risque, but it's like when you think about beer and education and teaching kids, like it doesn't go side by side.
Yeah.
As much as we all enjoy it every once in a while, regardless of what's going on. But it's like the aspect of beer that I really like is like the culinary side of it. Like it very much is like a chef type situation. And so like that's why I like to talk beer and like I like to explain it because it's not like, I mean, I've drank less in the last 5 years than I probably have ever, and I work in beer 24/7.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. So yeah, we're excited about beer school back, and
That's cool.
Always trying to do things.
So, I hate to keep talking about Two Toms, but one of my favorite beer fests is the Frozen Firkenfest.
Yeah.
I remember Buddy and I went, I think it might have been beginning of 2021, and I had so much fun. And it's one that I like to try to go to, but I've missed it because I've been out of town the last couple of years. How was this year's event?
Yeah, man. So I think the attendance was pretty high this year. It's nice because like Tom had been doing social media like himself for the most part, and so having an extra body, kind of working with social media and looking at stuff and using all of our little platforms that we can use to like send out emails and keep reminding, it worked pretty well for us. I can tell you that Tom and I both jinxed it really hard. On Tuesday of that week, I looked at the weather and it said it's supposed to be a high of like 54 or something, and I was like, the Not So Frozen Firkenfest coming up this weekend on social media. And he did the same thing and posted it in a couple beer groups that we're in. It was freezing. It was like the most cold I've been in a long time. As a former elementary science teacher, you would think that I could register that 54 is probably because it's 55 the night before and the low of like 21 is coming the next day. I had 2 sweatpants on, 2 hoodies on. It was frozen Firkenfest for sure. But we ended up, I think, with 20 plus one-off kegs. I think we had 3, and then the rest were just like breweries from the area, friends that we have in the industry. We even brought in some Chicago breweries this year. I'm not sure if you saw this, but Moore Brewing is opening in Fort Wayne.
No.
So Moore is out of Chicago. They're one of the
Okay.
bigger ones over there. They're opening a location right on the river here in town. They broke ground a couple years ago, and then they just officially announced like this past week that like, hey, we're gonna have it open by the end of next year, which is cool. So we invited them, and they sent us like brilliant tasting Imperial barrel-aged Imperial Stout. It was awesome. But yeah, a lot of our friends sent kegs. People that have been coming for years, or people that are new friends. We recently started becoming friends with Moontown out of Whitestown, and we did some collabs with them earlier this last year. And so they sent us a really good tasting coconut milk stout, and it's just fun, man, to have these guys in the industry that we are able to become friends with. And we got to brew a Sun King last year, which is huge for us.
Sure.
It's for sure going to be something that we continue on yearly, and I think this year was a pretty good one for sure.
Awesome. I think, if I remember correctly, that the attendees vote on what the best beer was of the day. Do you still doing that?
We didn't do it this year because we had really bad wind and we didn't have the things up, but we normally do that. Yeah.
What was your favorite out of the event?
Probably the Moore Brewing Imperial Stout for sure.
Okay, cool. You alluded to it earlier. We talked about it offline as well. The industry's in kind of a weird place right now.
Yep.
I've been assured by multiple sources that isn't anything to really be too terribly concerned with. Kind of curious as to what your take is on this whole, I won't call it a bubble burst, but I definitely think we've kind of crested a hill here. We're kind of riding on top of this crest and kind of not sure whether it's going to free fall downward or whether we're going to start to rise back up a little bit.
I think, when you look at where we are craft beer wise, so it's hard to call it a bubble because a bubble pops at some point and then never recovers. I don't think that's real. I think what we look at right now is we got to a point where there's so many breweries, right? Every little town had one, every big town had multiple. And I think you get to a point where it stops growing as a bubble. And I don't know, maybe it starts to deflate is what it's easier to say. And what I see happening, we've lost 3 breweries here in town. Like the 3 that closed publicly may have made some bad choices, buying, business choices, that kind of stuff. I don't think it's in a spot where people are drinking less beer. It's totally true. But I don't think it's in a spot that like that's causing our breweries to close for the most part. Some are. But I think we're at a spot now in 2025 where like quality over quantity is going to be a key. Is it a thing where this brewery has one really good staple beer, or they have, like house beers, for example, right? There's only a couple places I can think of that house beers to me are valuable. I mean, I don't enjoy going to the same place and drinking the same beer all the time.
Yeah, same.
I like if I'm at a restaurant that this restaurant has a rotating IPA line from this place. I like that a lot. I don't like where I go there and it's like the same IPA, the same lager, the same this.
Yeah.
It's just not something I enjoy. I like to be able to pursue different things. I like to drink my beer like I like to brew my beer. Different things all the time. What's new? What's not, So I think what's happening is the quality of the breweries are starting to get better. And I think the quantity of them are slowly starting to fade. And it's not at a point, I think we also got in a weird point in the industry where it seemed like it was a fast money maker. Profit margins on beer, huge, theoretically. But how many $6, $5 things do you have to sell to make ends meet? A lot. Even if you're making it for 50 cents a glass, like you still got to sell a lot of those things to make ends meet. There's a reason why Subway's not doing $5 footlongs anymore. Can't afford it. Like you got to get that more money. So I think you're going to see in 2025, 2026, I think we're going to still have closing breweries. It's still going to happen. But I think what's going to be is you're going to see the quality of products continue to rise. And we're also at a weird, to me, it's a weird standstill. Like feel like for a while, like every year there was like a huge new style of beer, right? Like when hazies blew up in the area, everyone was doing them. And now you have people that are really known for them. To me, there hasn't been a true style change like that in the last about a year. So I think we'll see, hopefully that would be able to slow down. But yeah, I think it's just, staying relevant, keeping people interested in coming back to your tap rooms. Quality over quantity to me is key. I'd rather have 12 super solid brewed beers than 16 mediocre beers. I'm hoping that the closing situation starts to slow down and we get to a point that we can settle out, but you never know. You can't survive with bad business decisions. And I just think you can't survive also with bad beer. Not everyone's going to be perfect, but I think you're just kind of pushing for that.
To that point too, Cody, I think you're right. I think you get one, maybe two chances to wow the people that come to your brewery. If you can't give them a quality, decent beer, I won't go back if I don't get a good beer. I mean, why?
Oh, for sure.
We're at the point now where, gosh, you're paying $5, $6, $7 for a pint of beer. And, I'd rather spend my money in some place that's going to give me a good tasting quality beer as opposed to, as you said, a mediocre kind of so-so beer.
And that's the thing too. Like you see some markups and some stuff. We had a distribution company close here, more local in Indiana, and a lot of guys lost their distro here. And then there's a guy out of the Mishawaka Valpo area who started his own distro company, picked up a lot of those up, and now those beers are all over the place. And a lot of them are like Chicago breweries. Obviously, he's bringing good craft beer into town, but like now we're paying. You go to these like craft beer bars and you're paying $12 to $14 for a 16-ounce hazy can.
Right.
And it's like, I don't know if I can afford this $12 hazy can, It's like when you know what it takes to brew it, but because of middlemen getting to the point you're at, like everyone's got to make some money. Yeah, it's hard to be like, yeah, I'm going to go here and drink a beer. And I think that's probably too, like I used to go every time I go to dinner, have a beer, I find something. And a couple of my places I usually go have really, really good craft beer menus. Those are starting to suffer. Not as exciting beers coming out because of that. Let's cut the $6 cost from my meal and I can have it for $5 at the brewery or $4, whatever else. So I'm really passionate about quality. I think for me, like, just like if I'm not going to do something if I can't do it to my best. I bring that to brewing too, to me, in my opinion. Like, I'm not going to go out and, run a 5K if I'm not going to try. I'm not running anyways, but like, what I'm saying? Like, if I'm not going to do something, if I'm not going to put my best to it, and that's just how I feel about beer too. So the guys here in town right now are very passionate about their products. They're very passionate about what they're doing. A lot of them are still owner brewer situations like Tom. Portlandia guys are owner brewers. The Dot and Line guys are owner brewers. I think that plays a big role in it too.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more buy-in. You're passionate about the product you're making, which is also the one you're selling. And it's not just like, hey, we pay this guy to brew our beer over here and we're selling it at $6 a pint. That's how I view it. I mean, it could be absolutely wrong. People might listen to this and be like, this guy's an idiot. This is how I feel about how the industry is right now.
Yeah, no, and I think also going back to the distribution, a lot of people think that distribution is a great thing, and it is. I'm not going to drive to Chicago just to make a beer run. So it's nice to see beer from other places come locally. But at the same time, that's not how you at Two Thomas make your money. You make your money by having people sit in the seats in the brewery. And so I'm always like, hey, if you're going to go buy beer someplace, do it at your local craft brewery instead, because they're going to benefit from it much more than you buying a 4-pack of their beer out of whatever grocery store or liquor store you're going to buy from.
Right. I think for me too, that's like, because like now doing outside sales, like when I go out of Fort Wayne, like, yeah, it's real easy for me to be like, listen, man, this is our product. I'm very passionate about it. I think it's pretty good. And we get it on in Valpo and Indy, and we're down to Evansville now, Bloomington, whatever, nice. Lafayette. But it's like really hard for me to like when I like sell like packaged products to the liquor stores locally, because I'm like, yeah, I get it, man. Like we want to be in there with everybody else. But at the same time, like the 35-40% markup that they're getting from our product, we could get if it was at our tap room. So, we're looking at a few things. We changed our premium or high ABV beers to 4-pack 12-ounce cans. And it brought our 4-packs down to $14.50. And to me, that price point in today's money society is nice looking. I can get a 12% 4-pack for $14.50. Like, let's go. And that also relates to the liquor store now too. They're also getting that same. They're buying it now at $10 or whatever it is, and they're getting it to sell it at $14.50 too. So it's at least the markup that they're getting it looks smaller and it's more affordable for the everyday consumer. So it's hard for me to like Like, I like draft locally because I like to do that, but package stuff, I'm like, man, I really wish we were able to just sell this out of our carry outdoor. But it is what it is. It's
Yeah.
2025 and it's craft beer, and you gotta do what you need to do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know we're nearing the end of our time, and I always ask the same question at the end of my episodes, and I don't remember what you told me 2 years ago, but we're going to ask it again.
I was trying to think about this when I saw. It was funny. It was I saw all the questions come through. I just missed the email before with this link, and so I was like, I can't remember how we do this.
So, if you were a beer, what style would you be and why? And you can think of it in 2025 Cody terms, not like 2022 Cody terms.
I think it's very similar, man. I think, I always joke about there's a lot of different layers to me. Okay. I lost my parents earlier to cancer. I lived a different lifestyle than some people have, And so to me, I always think of myself as what kind of beer would I be if there's different layers, there's different options. And more recently, I would say an Imperial Stout. And it would be because there is probably a god awful amount of options when it comes to. I mean, you could have base Imperial Stout, you could have barrel aged, you could have all the different adjuncts that you want to go through the list of different dessert options. So, for me myself, I think about I've brewed King Cake one, I brewed, I guess, Take on Cookies and Cream Ice Cream, Take on Rocky Road. We brewed this Not Our Money beer with all the extra stuff in there. I have a cold brew Imperial Stout. I have all these different Imperial Stouts. And so it's for me, it's just different layers and shades of Cody and who I am. And I think last year I was very similar to that same answer. Or last time I think I went with a mixed firm sour, the complexity of what it is. I think that's what I said last time. But it's just I think that's where I'm at. I don't want to be bitter as an IPA. I don't want to be clean and see-through and lager. So I think I'm just gonna go with there's a lot to me and there's a lot to my brewing style. I was talking to a family friend yesterday where they had no idea that I was a 4-H and FFA kid growing up. I showed sheep and I showed pigs, and I'm nowhere near that kid now today, but it was a version of Cody that's out there. I would say Imperial Stout. I would say adjunct Imperial Stout / plain Jane barrel aged, anything like that Imperial Stout. So.
I always enjoy chatting with you, Cody. It's always a lot of fun.
I'm glad we can make this happen again, man. Like I said, now that I do a lot of sales and a lot, tomorrow's another 8-hour day in the car. I normally turn on one of your guys' podcast episodes, either, and it's funny because at this point now I've been on, 15, 20 different people's shows, but it's always fun to go back and talk. And, there's these questions that you have from your mindset. And then we have the guys who are in the beer industry. We're talking about more beer industry stuff. And, yesterday it was a beer review podcast where they reviewed some of my beers and we just talked about some stuff. So it's each person does their own version of what they want to do. I've always been a sucker for people trying to make it. I know you're not trying to get rich off this podcast, but you also would not be mad if it blew up tomorrow. And so it's the same concept. I went from a home brewer to literally made a career out of a hobby. And so it's always fun to give back to you guys who are doing the sweat of reaching out and recording and editing and putting it out there. And I'm always willing to be on. I'm always willing to talk stuff. And I just love that you appreciate this 2 Times brand and appreciate what we're doing, and been a fan for a while. So I appreciate that, man.
Absolutely. And thank you. Yeah. It's tough being a creative and not being able to create. That's the reason I do it. I know it's the reason you do it too. So
that's what I'm saying, man. I'm not artistic. I'm not musically talented. I can barely cook recipes, but I can make beer. So, I was gifted with one creative aspect, and we're going to use it to the best of our ability.
Darn good too. So, man, I appreciate you.
That, man.
Good to chat with you, dude.
Always, dude. Thank you.
Last call.
It's nearly time to wrap things up, but first, one more for the road. This episode, I'm drinking Rye on Rye from Boulevard Brewing out of Kansas City, Missouri. From the brewer, this brawny, tawny ale is a savory celebration of spicy rye malt and rye whiskey, complements of extended aging in freshly emptied rye barrels. Rye on Rye pours a deep amber and evokes notes of charred oak and vanilla with a finish this delightfully boozy and sweet. Without further delay, this is a 13.2% ABV barrel-aged rye beer. It has a mild bitterness of 15 IBU. So it did pour a nice amber color. It's opaque, you can't really see through the beer. On the nose, you get that nice barrel age vibe. Certainly leaning into that rye barrel that was used. First sip impression. Oh, that is so nice. So initially, it had a very light-bodied mouthfeel on it. But then I thought more about the style, and I think that is very appropriate for what I'm drinking here. I get some nice spicy rye on the palate. And on that finish, I do get that vanilla. It's very subtle. But since I just pulled this out of the fridge, I know that will probably change and morph as the temperature of the beer increases. I really like the flavor profile. I am pretty fond of rye beers, although I really haven't had many true rye beers over the years, surprisingly. There's a certain earthiness, and I would almost say woodiness that is left on the palate. Maybe it's that charred oak that I'm getting here. As this has been exposed to the oxygen, the rye barrel aging aroma really starts to come through. I get a pleasant boozy burn, not overly so, but certainly reminding me that this is not your father's beer. This is a great example of a rye barrel-aged beer. It has everything I'm expecting from it. It's got the earthiness, it's got the rye spiciness, and a little bit of sweet vanilla that is included there as well. It's definitely a late winter, early spring kind of treat. So I give this one 4 tasters out of 5 on the Flightboard. Cheers, Boulevard Brewing. I'm always looking for new craft beverages to review. So if you've got one from your favorite local craft brewery, meadery, or cidery you'd like me to drink and describe, reach out and let me know. That's all for this episode of the 5 Beer Plan. With so many podcasts out there, thanks for choosing to listen to mine. Join me next time as I return to yeast, continue the homebrew project, and review another beer. Remember to hit the subscribe button on your preferred podcast platform to be notified of new episodes. Follow me on Instagram as well, 5 Beer Plan 2022, to see what is happening on my personal ale trail. I'd love to hear from you, and there are several ways you may do so. Leave a comment for this episode on Spotify, direct message me on Instagram, or email me directly, 5beerplan@frontier.com. Be sure to support your local breweries, choose your beers wisely, and drink them responsibly. Until next time, keep walking your ale trail, and stay thirsty, my friends.